Hi, everybody. I'm Jax James, NORML State Policy Manager, here for our weekly update. So what we're going to go over today are some of the high-level overviews of some bills that have been passing or moving, I should say, and some states passing across the nation. Of course, as always, I love to see you guys drop where you're at in the comments, and then I can go back to my spreadsheet and double check if there's any other bills that are active in your area that I might have missed. So it's Friday. It's been a weird day already for me, but happy to be here to talk about cannabis policy with everybody. So let's go ahead and kick it off. This week's update will highlight legislative developments in Arizona, California, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Again, comment your state, and if that I didn't list off your state just now, I'm happy to come back at the end and double check and see if there's any actively moving legislation in your state. So let's start with Arizona. House Bill 2050 amends state law so that honorably discharged veterans who have lived in Arizona for a year will no longer have to pay the $150 fee to the state to obtain a medical marijuana certification card. Instead, they would receive a medical marijuana card for free after receiving a doctor's recommendation. The update here is that two different versions of HB 2050 have passed the House and the Senate. The bill now heads to the conference committee. This is a committee where people will, excuse me, I think my alert just went off, and let me go ahead and silence that. I apologize. Okay. Coming back over here. So conference committee is where lawmakers from the House and the Senate are selected and they negotiate that final language. So the bill is heading to conference committee. Final language should be available soon, we hope. There's a link, as always, to message your legislator. So in the description of today's video, you'll see the first link is the blog, and that's going to have all of the links to news coverage, bill text, action alerts that you want to check in on. If you don't see your state listed there, you can always go to norml.org/act. You'll see all of our federal action alerts at the top. Everybody should participate in those. And then underneath, you'll see a dynamic map, and you can hover over your state. And if your legislative session is in session right now, and if there are bills that we're tracking, you'll see them there and you can participate in those action alerts. All right, California, man, things have been really moving in California, and shout out to California NORML. They do an amazing job out there staying on top of, really just dozens and dozens of bills. You'll find a link to a full blog from them with like a whole update on a lot of bills. I selected some of what we are calling like quote unquote priority bills, legislation that we are tracking and very interested to see implemented, or in one case, I believe there's one that we oppose as well. So in California, over 750 NORML supporters have written letters to their assembly members in support of AB 2188. 2188 would ban employers from denying workers jobs or firing them based on a positive drug test for inactive metabolites of THC. These metabolites can be detected for days or weeks after use, and it has no correlation to on-the-job impairment. So this is an important bit of legislation that we hope to see advancing that policy in California. The update there is that the bill has passed the Assembly and was most recently passed by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now AB 2188 is set for its next hearing on June 29th, so in just 5 days, in the Senate Labor Committee, where more amendments are expected to be added. But if passed, California would be the 7th state to offer employment protections for recreational users. The others are Nevada, New Mexico, New Jersey, Connecticut, Montana, and Rhode Island. I believe also Illinois recently did something, but maybe that was medical. I'll have to double check. So there is a note for you to message your legislator there. Also, SB 1186 requires all local governments to permit access to medical cannabis, either via an establishment of licensed dispensaries or via a mobile delivery service. Such legislation is needed because a large percentage of localities currently prohibit retail access and delivery services. The update here is that the bill previously passed in the Senate and most recently passed the Assembly Business and Professions Committee, where California NORML representatives testified in favor of the bill. SB 1186 is set for its next hearing in the Assembly Judiciary Committee in just 4 days on the 28th of this month. So make sure you click on that action alert there. Two more bills I want to highlight out of California. Assembly Bill 1706 expedites the expungement of past marijuana convictions by providing the courts with a deadline of January 1st, 2023 to update their case records and transmit them to the DOJ. This will maintain the state's, the DOJ maintains the state's criminal history database and responds to any background checks. So this is a very important update to happen to make sure that those expungements are really implemented. The update here is that AB 1706 passed unanimously out of the Assembly Public Safety Committee, and it now heads to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. So make sure you participate in our action alert there. AB 2595 also protects parental rights for cannabis consumers. This legislation has passed the Assembly floor, and now it has also advanced out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So make sure you participate in your action alert there. And again, as I mentioned at the opening of talking about California, there is a link to the blog from California NORML that you can find there. So if you need to read about some of the other bills that have been moving, you can check that out there. I'm going to come in and check on the comments real quick before I go to Louisiana. Okay, I see y'all commenting some of the places that you're from. Awesome. Welcome. Louisiana. Okay, that's what I'm going to talk about next. So I'm just going to start with Louisiana now. All right. Louisiana, their legislative session has ended due to some great work of activists in the state, work with MPP and NORML. There's a pretty diverse slate of bills that have been enacted. And I want to go over about 5 bills that I think are really important that we talk about. The following bills have been signed by the governor and take effect on August 1st, 2020. So we've got House Bill 988, which provides employment protections to patients who lawfully consume medical marijuana while away from their jobs. This provision does not alter existing law regarding the consumption of cannabis while at work, which is still strictly prohibited. Then there's also House Bill 629, which prohibits law enforcement from conducting a search of a person's residence based on the odor of marijuana without first obtaining a warrant, which I think is a great codification of an important right there. Then there's 2 bills, House Bill 135 and 137, that deal with reciprocity for patients within the state's medical cannabis program. So HB 135 permits dispensing of medical marijuana to certain qualifying patients who are not Louisiana residents. And HB 137 ensures that those individuals have immunity from prosecution for the purchase and possession of medical marijuana products. And then the last one I wanted to touch on was House Bill 190, which authorizes nurse practitioners to prescribe authority or to have prescriptive authority, to recommend medical marijuana to patients. So NORML's Deputy Director, Paul Armentano, has been tracking and watching this really closely with me, and he praised lawmakers for advancing and enacting these measures. He said, "These are common sense reforms that provide further and sorely needed protections and freedoms for patients and others. Lawmakers are commended for putting politics aside and taking these important steps forward." So thanks for that comment, Paul. Next, we're going to touch on some action in North Carolina. So according to statewide polling, 82% of North Carolinians believe that marijuana should be legalized in the state for medical purposes, including 75% of Republican voters. Legislation is pending to regulate medical cannabis for patients in North Carolina. It's SB 711. It's supported by Republicans and Democrats, and the bill would allow qualifying patients with the physician's recommendation to have a 30-day supply of medical cannabis at a time via these licensed retail outlets, or medical outlets, And the update here is that legislation did pass the Senate 36-7. House Republicans held a closed-door meeting where they have allegedly voted to not advance the legislation any further this session. There are about, I believe, 5 days or so, about a week or less, left in the North Carolina session. So if you would like to message your legislator there, we definitely encourage you to do so. And also stay tuned for interim actions, engaging with candidates and incumbents and making sure that they know the will of the people in their district in advance of the next session. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here with Pennsylvania before I come over to the comments to really kind of dig in to where all of you are. We've got Senate Bill 1167 and its companion House Bill 2558, and they seek to facilitate safer and more legitimate banking practices for medical cannabis businesses and address the lack of insurance options for medical patients who rely on cannabis. If passed, the bills would ensure that all money related to permit holding cannabis business is legitimate and would protect financial institutions and insurers that work with cannabis businesses from any unjust prosecutions or penalties. It also allows for the state's tax deduction of business expenses and permits state credit unions to interact with cannabis businesses. The bill's provision allows insurers to lawfully work with cannabis businesses, and this could significantly benefit medical patients who currently have no options for insurance coverage for their medical cannabis products. This legislation protects consumers, small businesses, and the industry at large. So the update here is that after passing the Senate, SB 1167 has passed its third House committee, the Commerce Committee. So please, if you live in Pennsylvania, make sure that you reach out to your legislators in support of this important legislation that generally helps everyone all the way around, I think. The last item I'm going to close out on is legislation that NORML opposes. SB 749 would have made it easier for employees to have safety-sensitive occupations to be terminated or denied employment compensation if any employer makes a good faith determination that the employee is impaired. I love these air quotes. We're going to air quote it up today, guys. Placing the burden on the employee to rebut the employer's determination via a drug test. Further, impairment is defined as the quantity of THC metabolite in the urine of 15 milliliters, nanograms or above. The bill would have allowed employers to force disclosure of medical cannabis patient status, and it would foreclose workers' compensation claims for the cost of medical cannabis. So this bill did pass out of committee and it did advance to the Senate floor. But at that time, SB 749 was removed from the table. So at this time, this bill is no longer currently moving. So those are our updates out of Pennsylvania. Back to the comments. All right. So we talked about Louisiana. Let's go to Nebraska because I see y'all in the comments. Nebraska currently is in session with multiple bills having been filed, but many of them have been indefinitely postponed. So unfortunately, it looks like in Nebraska, there may be some stalling out of the legislative efforts there. However, I do want to point out, if you're in Nebraska, there is currently a ballot initiative effort underway to get medical cannabis worked on in the state. So please take a look at that. All right, next I see New York is in the house today. Hello, New York. All right, New York's session has completed. It was done on June 10th. So for now, the legislative cycle is completed in New York. But I think this is a great opportunity for me to tell you that there are still federal actions you can participate in. If you go to norml.org/act, at the very top, you'll see, I think it's maybe 5 actions that we currently have that you can let your federal legislators know how you feel about the issues. So for those of you that are not currently in a legislative cycle, there you go. And the next person here, Texas, my home state where I live. We are not in the legislative cycle right now. we're in the part of the interim that is known as the election cycle. Primaries have happened, runoffs have happened, and we are prepping and gearing up for the general election. Of course, I created the Texas NORML Voters Guide back in 2012, so I'm super stoked to be working with NORML on the Smoke the Vote initiative that we're working on. We're hoping to have it out to you in the coming weeks and then continue to keep it updated with fresh content leading up to the general election. Also, if you live in Texas, there are some cities that are working on some local initiatives to try to depenalize certain types of possession in the local area. Texas doesn't allow for signature collections at the state level, which is where we have to actually change the law. But at the local level, if you're classified as a home free city, I'm not saying that totally right. I'd have to click back to double check, but there's a term for certain cities. There's about 200 of them that do have a little bit more wiggle room on what they can do with their laws. So if you live in Killeen, Harker Heights, San Marcos, Denton, Elgin, and they're looking for Lubbock and El Paso to add them as well. So if you're in those cities, make sure you reach out to Ground Game Texas. So that's a little update from my Texas people. North Dakota, I see you guys are here and welcome. Thank you for joining us. It looks like North Dakota does not have any current legislative efforts happening. And there was, let me double check, I believe, yes, there is New Approach North Dakota, and they are working to gather signatures for a ballot initiative in North Dakota. So I encourage you to look into that so that you can be engaged in your state. Coming over now to Michigan. I want to say that your session is over, Michigan. No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Happily so. Okay, Michigan, you have a bill that would address medical taxes, and you also have a bill that we currently oppose, which would restrict some caregiver rights. So again, if you live in Michigan, go to norml.org/act, go to the dynamic map, hover over your state, and you can participate in those action alerts there. All right, some friends from Minnesota. Let's see where we're at in Minnesota. Minnesota's session actually ended at the end of May. And unfortunately, none of our priority legislation advanced there. So I definitely encourage those of you from Minnesota to reach out to your legislators in the meantime and engage with any candidates that you think have a good chance and can make a difference in the upcoming session. Illinois. Oh, Illinois just had a great bill pass. Let me go back. Sorry, guys. I know it's a little weird when I'm like navigating around, but. All right, there is a expungement and employee protection bill that both recently passed. I believe we have a blog post on it. So good things happening in Illinois. However, Illinois, your session is completed. It ended at the end of May. So make sure you participate in those federal action alerts that I mentioned. Arkansas. Hi, Arkansas. Welcome. Let's see. Arkansas, the session there is pretty short and it ended in May. So sorry, no active legislation there. But again, 5 federal action alerts you can participate in at norml.org/act. I see a couple comments about the safe banking being removed from the state's Competes Act. And so again, anyone who is tracking and following that stuff at the federal level, it is extremely important that you are engaging with your U.S. congressperson and U.S. senator. All right, I see Massachusetts. I want to say that your session is completed, but let's see. No, your session is still going on. Okay, let's talk about it. So in Massachusetts, anyone who's there, go to norml.org/act, hover over your state, and you'll see action alerts having to do with insurance coverage, employment, ones that we oppose on a THC cap, ones that have to do with social equity, employment protections, and social use. So I encourage all Massachusetts, I don't think I said that right, to look at those action alerts and share them with your network. Whenever you guys are doing this, the action alert at the end should empower you to retweet it, send an email to people, copy and paste some text, and share it on your social media channels or text your friends. So I definitely encourage y'all to do that. Oh, Patrick says y'all are Bay Staters. I'm going to try to remember that, Patrick. Thank you. All right. Okay, friends. Well, those are all the states that I see right now. I really appreciate all of you tuning in and watching today. Quick recap. First link in the description today is the link to our blog post that talks about some of the exciting legislation moving across the country. You'll also find a link to norml.org/act there. You can participate in the federal actions, and then you can hover over your state and see what active legislation is moving there and participate in those. Additionally, if you support NORML's mission and the work that we do as one of the only cannabis consumer and patient advocacy organizations in the country, I highly encourage you to click the link to become a member and become a regular dues paying member, or make a donation. You can select one-time or recurring donations, and so I encourage that. Lastly, if you are in a state and you're not yet engaged in your NORML chapter, we're in most states, not all states, but most states. And so I encourage you to check out a chapter near you and see if you can connect with them and get integrated and ready for the upcoming session. Lastly, I'm going to close it out with this, friends. Elections are coming up. It's extremely important. Some states still are facing primaries. Some people are still facing runoffs. So it's extremely important that you go make sure you are registered to vote and participate in either your primary or runoff elections now, but also be prepared for the general election in November. And to that end, we are working right now on Smoke the Vote. We hope to have it out to you in the coming weeks, definitely a few months before elections, don't worry. But we will continue to update it as more comments and votes, et cetera, are taken. So please stay tuned to the work that we are doing. And I look forward to connecting with you guys again soon. I am going to be working on the Smoke the Vote pretty intensely. And not only will we be including the candidate positions, both incumbents and challengers, but we'll also be including ballot initiatives. And this year, it's also my goal to get a pretty good list of local initiatives that are happening across the country, because there are some of those as well as statewide ones. So thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in today. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I hope you guys have a safe and fun weekend. Thank you.